Okay. Awesome. That was amazing, guys. Thank you so much. So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening at the Gnomon School of Visual Effects here in Hollywood for our behind-the-scenes look at the animated short film Weeds, which is an independent film created by a crew of volunteer Disney artists. We're so lucky to have several of the artists with us here tonight, including the film's director, Kevin Hudson, on the far right there. Kevin's an asset artist at Walt Disney Animation Studios and also an instructor here at Gnomon School for our character modeling and sculpting class. So that's awesome. Thank you, Kevin, for coming. Joining us next to Kevin, we have Bradford Simonsen, the film's producer, who's best known for his work on at Disney. We're also honored to have 3 of the film's artist volunteers with us, too. So Jean-Christophe is next, sir. Have Wayne Unten next. And Hendrik Panz. And last but not least, we have Dale Turner with us here tonight, who's the film's composer, right here. So tonight's presentation will offer a fascinating look behind the scenes of the making of this short film, walking us through the stages of development from concept through layout to animation and visual effects. If you're joining us here on live stream and Facebook Live, please talk to us throughout the event. We'll be on the live chat shortly where you'll be able to ask questions. You can also tweet questions tonight using hashtag Gnomon on Twitter. For those in the audience here tonight, if you have a question for tonight's guests, please raise your hand and we'll bring the mic to you. If you just wait for the mic so that speakers and live stream viewers can hear your questions clearly. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank our event sponsor, Lenovo, for helping us to bring these free educational events to you. Tonight's presentation is powered by Lenovo and Intel technology, which our students also use here on campus. We'll be offering a campus of after tonight's event, a campus tour, sorry, after tonight's event. It's been a long week already. If you haven't checked out the facilities here before, we'll be happy to show you around. We have classrooms open, the sculpture room, VR lab, and we'll also show you a sneak peek of the new library. So with that said, let's have another big round for all of tonight's guests, and we'll hand over to Kevin to get started. Thank you.
All right, so I guess it's live. Hey, I want to thank you all for coming. Our film is just about 2 months old now, and we're very excited to be able to share it. This is the largest audience I think we have shown it to in a single screening. Of course, and it's streaming all over, so I have no idea how many people are out there watching it. But it's a huge honor to be here at Gnomon, and a huge honor to be sharing it with all of you. For those who know me, especially here at Gnomon, the idea that I would do an animated film that didn't involve robots or monsters or some sort of creature is probably kind of a crazy idea, let alone that I would do an animated film and it would be about a little dandelion. But this project entered my life about 1.5 years ago, and it was a obsession that I just had to make this little film. And I was fortunate enough to be surrounded by brilliant artists that I could reach out to, and they all jumped in and lent a hand, and without them, this film would never get made. So and big thanks to the Walt Disney Animation Studios for allowing us to make this film in our spare time at work, or after work.
And before work.
And before work, and on weekends, and at lunch. It was a little project that when we all started on it, I thought for sure we'd be in and out in 6 months, because it's just over 2 minutes long. It's 30 shots. And how hard could making an animated short be? But it was an amazing experience, and such an amazing learning experience. And so Weeds is the short film. Some people ask me, why is this film called Weeds? Especially since the main theme of the film and reason it was made is I wanted to say something about refugees and immigrants and their importance as people, and that they're people just like every other person. And so the title Weeds is a stand-in for any derogatory term directed at a group of people. My family came from Ireland, and we were called Micks and Paddies. So there's plenty of names out there for all different times given to people. And the term weeds comes also from this quote that has stuck with me over the years. Is, what is a weed but a plant whose beauty and purpose has not yet been celebrated? Because all plants are just plants. And some plants we deem as flowers, and some plants we relegate to being weeds. And I just wanted to say that there's no such thing as a weed, because there's an old saying, when you create beauty, you create ugly, when in fact, people just are beautiful in their own ways. So that was something I really wanted to say. We have a website for the film, which you can keep up with on the film and find out a lot more about who we are and why we made the film. But you'll hear all about tonight. We also have a Facebook page, so please like our Facebook page so you can keep up with us and what we're doing. We're getting ready to do a online release for a 2-week period around Thanksgiving. So hopefully it will from November 12th through the 26th, so you can see it and share it with your families. So as I said, some of the inspirations for the film comes from refugees and immigrants. Brad and I both experienced what it's like to be an immigrant. I lived in England for a while, and Brad lived in Canada for a while. And being an immigrant is a precarious place to be. It's when you're an immigrant, especially both of us were guests of the Queen, and we were there by their pleasure. And if we quit our job or they fired us, you would have 30 days to vacate the country and get yourself and your partners and your dogs and all of your stuff and get out. And I think coming back here, and when a year and a half ago, there was so much anti-immigrant and anti-refugee rhetoric floating around that it didn't sit well. And I wanted to say something. I wanted to say something as an artist, but I didn't know how to say it. And it's like you're feeling like you've just got to say something, you're going to explode. And there are just all these pictures. I grew up in the 80s when there was the Cuban refugee crisis, when all these people were coming over on boats and whatever they could put together to try and get from Cuba to Florida. And one of the images that stuck in my head was a mother passing her baby, her child, to the lifeguards. I tried to find the image, and this was the closest one I could find. But it was that, if I'm going to go down with my ship, at least save my child, was something that's always stuck with me. And that played out in the animated short at the bit where, at the end, the dandelion throws the seeds to the wind. It's almost like he's passing the children to the lifeguard, to the breeze, to try and, if I can't make it, maybe my children can. So a lot of the inspirations were refugees, immigrants, the whole DACA scene, the U.S. taking that position on that, and starvation, war, and drought. I went to Africa at the beginning of the year, and I got to see how much the drought is affecting the people in Kenya, and it's an interesting experience. So some of the themes of weeds. One of the main things, I didn't want the film to be a downer, because I knew that we needed to make a film, if we're going to inspire people, that it needed to be an uplifting film. And so the driveway becomes almost symbolic of any great distance that anyone has to travel, and it's something, an impossible situation that needs to be overcome. The sacrifice for family was important in it. And like I said, the inspiration, that there be something that's going to inspire people to think differently, because if we can make them feel differently, we can make them think differently. And if we can make them think differently, then we can change the world. And I wanted to say something about that all lives have worth. I think all of us, one thing that was fantastic about all that was, once it started to show what we wanted to say, I found other people and other artists that all wanted to say something too. And when you band together a bunch of people, then something can happen. I found that people wanted an artistic outlet for what they wanted to say, to promote compassion amongst the world. I know one of my personal goals was I wanted to expand my knowledge of the pipeline. And it also became a chance for other people that helped out on the program, or on the show, to expand their knowledge of the pipeline. Because a lot of people did jobs that were slightly outside of their normal comfort zone. And that was a really great chance for them to grow. It was also a fantastic chance for other employees to get to know each other better, because we had such a sort of small group of team that was all volunteering their time, it gives a chance for people to get to know each other a little more as people. One of the things that I think helps if you're going to put together your own film is having a mission statement. And the mission statement that's sort of settled in with this film is what I have written down below, is where if we can make people feel empathy for something as tiny as a little dandelion, then perhaps we can make them feel something more for their fellow human beings. And that became one of the tools that was used to help recruit people in, and it just sort of really solidified the goal of the project. One of the things that was really interesting with our project is, and the Disney Studios as a whole, is that our studio is a studio made up of people from all over the world. The Walt Disney Animation Studios attracts people from the best of the best from all over the planet, and they pride themselves on looking and finding the best of the best. And what's really great is, at the end of the show, we checked in with everybody that was on the team to see where they were from, or where their parents were from, where their parents' parents were from, basically where were you descended from. And these were all the different countries that the people on our team could trace their background to, their heritage. And some of them are names I've never even heard of. Andina is a country I've not ever heard of. So it's exciting. And I'm still hoping that we're going to find a couple more names to fill in, so I have a whole block of 40 different countries represented. I always ask this at presentations. How many people in the room are immigrants? Anyone? A couple, great. All right, how many people's parents are immigrants?
A few more.
And how many grandparents?
Yeah.
Great-grandparents.
Yeah.
That's about where I hit.
Almost the whole room, yeah.
So
great-grandparents.
It usually ends up being about the entire room at this point can track back and see that they've come from somewhere else. And so this whole rise of nativism and nationalism and this anti-immigrant stance, it doesn't make sense in America. A quote that I remember from when I was a kid, it was a play I saw, and the villain in the play makes a statement, something to the fact of, my family has had problems with these darn immigrants ever since we came to this country. And the irony is not lost on the audience. It's meant as a joke. So, like I said, I tend to have a background making robots and stuff, so to be inspired to make a little project about dandelion is kind of out of character for me. But yes, in fact, the main character in this play, or in this short movie, is a dandelion. And we did a lot of research to find out what dandelions are like, because one of the things at Disney Animation that they hammer into us a lot, and John Lasseter is a big fan of it, is research, research, research. Find out the truth, because an audience will know when it's not true. And we all know when it's not true, so why not just tell the truth? So I spent a lot of time the first summer when we were starting to think about, are we going to do this project or not going to do it? How could we do this? Picking and dissecting dandelions. So I was picking dandelions out of my neighbor's yard, and I would count the leaves on it. And I'd count the sepals on it, and I'd count the smaller sepals, and I'd look at how the little seeds are constructed. And it was very interesting to sort of look at these little things so closely. And I was surprised. I found this little video online where it changes, and it goes through the life cycle, and you can see how they go. And it was really interesting to sort of see how this thing actually works. What is interesting is the original concept that I pitched for my first time to a friend of mine who's an animator at work, when I was sort of thinking, do we want to do this? What do you think? Is it worth the work that's going to be involved to make this, is that he had 3 little seeds on his face that kind of like 2 eyes and a nose. And I remember that the animator that I pitched it to looks at me and said, oh, please don't do the 3 dots on the face. It's such a cliche. It's a dandelion. Everybody knows a dandelion. Everybody knows what a dandelion's life cycle is. Can't we do the puff? And I thought about it, and I said, I think we could do that. How much harder could that be to do? And it was such a better idea. And I can't even begin to imagine not having that, because originally he just fell and the 3 dots fell off his face and rolled into the dirt. And how much of a climax is that? So it was a much better idea, and it just became part of the project. I am amazed at how quickly they do pop open. They pop open just amazingly fast. Because I picked one up and I put it on the counter in the kitchen. I walked into the other room and I came back and it had opened. So when you see in these videos, it just looks like it pops. I've never seen one pop personally, but I can imagine it must be just a split second. So I took pictures of them after the little puffs had fallen off. So you can see my fingers in there, and I've taken these with my little iPhone. So it's amazing how you can just walk around with this little thing and gather reference photography anywhere you go. Another interesting incident with the whole life cycle of the dandelion is how the dandelions root. I never really knew how they rooted, and I had a completely different concept for the sprouting shot at the end until Brad said, well, how do they root? And so we dug on the internet, and we found this image right here.
We found a video, actually, and this image showing them floating in and then sprouting.
And it's amazing. They send little teeny roots down from the surface into the ground, and then the plant lifts up out of the seed.
Yeah.
So
this is the little parachute, and then it sprouts and grows.
So that's actually how we did it. And so when you see the film, you do get, as another layer just beyond the whole life struggle to find a better life, you get the life cycle of a dandelion in the film, which just adds just sort of another little layer to the whole thing. Oh, one last thing on dandelion. It's interesting that the name dandelion comes from Latin, from dente de leon, which basically means tooth of a lion. So I've always thought like our little dandelion has actually got the heart of a lion in it. The other thing, when we're forming the idea of the film, you sort of banter around like, well, what do we want this thing to look like? Do we want it to be something really graphic and simple like this over here on the right? Do we want sort of a storybook quality? And there you can see it wasn't such a stupid idea putting 3 dots on the face. It's literary. So and then do we put the little like spikes on the petals? And I looked at what has Disney or sort of the classic animation companies done to depict plants. And what had live action done? And we had Audrey 2 and Little Shop of Horrors, and all these things were kind of like, well, that's not what we want. And I started looking more real because I kept thinking, this is we're talking about a real human issue. The film deserves to have kind of a more real look to it, and yet we're talking about a living plant, so it's going to be kind of surreal. So I started taking up pictures of roots and interesting roots. And this one came up, and it was like, well, that's like an octopus, and we can't have something that's going to represent a human look like an octopus, because that would be really creepy, and yeah, exactly. And then I came up with this carrot that had these things, and I looked at it, it's like, that almost looks like feet and legs. And you can start to go, well, that could be human legs, and that might be something that could be done and help us tell the story of people that are stuck in a bad situation, wanting to make their way for a better life. It's the American dream where we're telling it, so we needed to make this based around people. So this was kind of where he ended up landing in the concept design, which was, it's sort of human proportions, but not really. I explored, since I was doing the modeling on this, I explored where the leaves would come out of the plant. And one thought was, well, let's put the arms up where arms would be coming out of it, and then the waist is down lower, and he's got these other leaves. But it looked ridiculous because it wasn't a dandelion anymore. It started becoming some sort of flower. It didn't feel like it didn't feel authentic. So we went back and put all the leaves having that common origin at the base, and then bringing them up, forming the shoulders, and then dropping them back down to create arms. And that sort of settled in at helping to create that human proportions. Even though he's got this super long neck, that allows it to have this really sort of swaying flower that could be used all over the place. And then the other leaves that came up on the back, the thought for the silhouette would be those leaves would represent a backpack. since our character in his human form is representative of a refugee or an immigrant that might be carrying stuff on their back. And then the chest leaf would help to convey emotion. Since there was no facial characteristics or no human facial characteristics on this at all, the body language would have to tell the complete story about what his internal mood is and what he's feeling. And this character would need to be a character that we could see think, that we could see have hope, that would have dreams of what he wanted to do with his life. That was one of the most important things that someone told me early on in the project was when I had this little miserable weed that's looking across the driveway and all he sees is the excess water in the neighboring yard and he's stuck in this dry yard where there's no hope. The best piece of advice I got, you can't have a main character that's miserable. The character needs to be hopeful. And if you have hope, then that's what the audience will take away. And so I pass it on to you. You're thinking about making a film. Don't just make a film about misery. Make a film about hope. Turn it on its head. So here you can see that the seedling, the baby, and then the final Dan at his death. The environment for the film was kind of fun. I always tell the story. The way the story came to me is I was out front of my house, which this is a picture of my house, which probably looks a little familiar by now. And I was out pulling the dandelions out of my front yard, which is the green lawn on the right. And as I was pulling the dandelions out, I looked over at my neighbor's yard, which this is my neighbor's yard right here. And she never waters it. And so everything's dead, except for a few dandelions that are clinging to the edges of the sidewalk, dreaming about being over in my yard. And I looked at the dandelions in her yard, and I said, well, no wonder the dandelions keep coming to my yard, because if I was in that yard, I'd want to be in my yard. And it was that moment of inspiration. And suddenly, I looked at those dandelions and said, this is just what those immigrants and refugees are going through when they're stuck in a place where there's no hope, there's no water, there's no food, there's no opportunity, there's no life. And I suddenly said, wow. And I felt terrible for these little dandelions I was about to throw away. And I felt terrible about the ones in my neighbor's yard. And I had this awakening moment of suddenly, this is the metaphor. This is the way we can tell people that lives matter. Because if we take it to something as simple as a little plant, that all it wants is to get to water. Because if it doesn't get to water, it's going to die. People can understand the situation of other people in need. And I said, this is a film. I remember going to people at work going, I've had this vision of a film that I think I want to make. Is it worth doing? Because this is going to be a lot of work. And they said, let's do it. And JCP was one of the first people I pitched it to. And he looked at me and he goes, let's do it. And so he came on and helped out with getting the film made. And it was just all the people that came on board that were suddenly was like, yes, we can do this film, and maybe we can change the way people feel. And if we can make them feel something for a little plant, then maybe we can make them feel something for other people. And animation is a vehicle where you can generate empathy for things that people would never think they'd care about, ever. Cars. Bugs, weeds. You know, we can do it in animation. And this is a film that could not be told in any other medium other than animation. I can't imagine outside of me with strings, puppeteering a little dandelion, trying to tell this story as pathetically as that would be, that you could do this story. And so this is what amazed me about this whole process of animation and what we can do. So we started putting together a script. We started putting together assets, and we started coming up with what this whole thing should look like. The inspiration for where it should look like was my front yard. I tried a couple different ideas, and it just sort of came back to sort of this evolved version of my front yard. When I look at it, the things that balance on it is my lawn has water, so you've got green grass, there's a tree. Naturally, on her side, there's a light instead of a tree. And there's no grass There's only this dry dirt. And this is a photo of her yard, and it actually became the texture for the dead lawn in the film. So life imitating, or art imitating life. If you look closely at the front lamp that's next to the door, it's modeled to look like the Statue of Liberty arm and lamp. Further emphasizing that this was Ellis Island. This is the dream, the American dream of getting to a better life. At the time we were at Disney, we were working up in a facility because the main building we were in is being remodeled. And so we were up in a facility which we lovingly called Tahunga, because it's on Tahunga?
Tahunga and Vine, yeah.
Tahunga and, yeah. So it's up on Tahunga, and it's right next to the Burbank Airport. So every few minutes, a plane would come buzzing in overhead.
And the train.
And the train, which you can see here, would go by, and the whole building would rumble. The building had a lot of problems. It leaked in the winter. They had like big, huge plastic tarps everywhere because water was coming down.
Trash can over the computers. Perfect.
Yeah, because all the water was going onto the computers. So that was the thing. The restrooms sometimes didn't work. I'm sure it was an experience, but I think in some ways, I've been telling you like that this has somehow merged with the DNA of Disney animation. And if you saw the film Zootopia, did everybody see Zootopia? There's a line, Judy Hopps is on the phone, and she goes, "I'm at the corner of Vine and Tahunga." And so that's what the reference is to. This film, we were sitting out front. I was talking to Adil, who did the matte paintings for the film. And we were going, well, what do you see when you look in the direction of the yard without water? And we looked up, and there were the big power lines. And I said, well, you see that. You know, that's not plant-friendly. That's what you would see. And so that became the extension on that direction. So Tahunga is just part of it. In fact, the new film, Brad and I are working on Wreck-It Ralph 2, and there's a whole section in the new film, and the art direction is basically make it look like Tahunga. So when you see the film when it comes out, you'll know what we're talking about. So here is what we built for the environment. The film takes place over about 15 feet. And so it's a very small, contained environment that the whole thing takes place in. And all we did to make the environment was the two houses. So you've got the two houses and a little bit of street out front. So I kept it to a very contained amount of space, which if you're going to do your own animated short film, and how many people here are thinking about doing an animated short film of their own?
Or doing one.
Or doing one.
Currently.
Cool.
Okay, yeah, it's a lot of people.
That's great.
That's great.
You know, and those of you who didn't raise your hand, maybe this will inspire you. You'll find it to be one of the most rewarding experiences of your life if you do it. But one of the keys to it is keeping it constrained. I've seen a lot of people that have wanted to start films over the years, and they come up with this massive idea, and it's many characters and many environments, and it becomes this huge behemoth that's not possible to be done. So if you think of something that's going to be small and tight and constrained, you have a better chance of actually completing it. So in this case, we had just basically one small yard where the whole thing takes place, and one character, or 1.5 characters. The nice thing about it being so small is we were able to really refine everything. So in the front yard, you can see we've got our driveway with the lamppost and the tree, just like in real life. I changed this house a little bit. At one point, I considered, how far do we take this immigrant analogy? How far do we take this? Because at one point, I was like, well, what if we made this house look like Ellis Island? Like really, since that was the gateway for immigrants to the United States, what if we really took it that far? And I looked at it and went, oh, that would look ridiculous. So some ideas just are ridiculous. So it actually kind of ended up looking a little bit more like my house with some augmentation. But there's some intentional stuff, too, with it, that the roof has a nice upward sweep to it that pulls it skyward, which helps to say that there's an upward movement to this house. The roof is a mansard roof, which is a French roof, which also, since a lot of immigrants are coming into Europe, that it fits, again, with sort of the destination that immigrants are heading towards. The windows are abnormally large, which help to create openness. The door is right here. It's a big door with a lamp. Like I said, it's like the Statue of Liberty. And then there's a gate that is open. Again, a sign that says open, an invitation. There's a nice little sidewalk that even leads up to the house. So it's hopefully pulling you in to that house. When you look at it, every time you see it, it should just pull you, that there's openness there. But then when you look at the other house, it's in essence a wall. It's a complete stop. There's nowhere to go there. There's no outlet. The windows are tiny. There's rocks. There's stop signs. There's all kinds of things that basically tell you that there is no hope in this direction. One of the bits of sort of fun in here is there's the wave pattern that's on the front of the garage door, and that's intentionally there. One of the things I've learned in working with everybody at Disney and going to I went to a costume exhibit, is they talked about art direction, and there's nothing that is in a movie that is by mistake. Everything that's in there is done with intention. So the fact that there's waves on the front of this garage door is not just an accident. It's because this driveway is not just merely symbolic of a desert that Syrian immigrants are trying to cross to get into Europe, or Mexican immigrants are trying to get across to get into the United States. It's symbolic of an ocean, because many of our ancestors came from Europe, whether they were the Pilgrims coming over at Thanksgiving, whether they are the Irish immigrants that left after the potato famine, or whether it was the Germans, or the Russians, or all these different groups. Or we can go across the Pacific and all the people that came from there. So, I mean, this driveway is symbolic of any great distance that people have had to cross over the years. There's also that swirled cement pattern on the driveway, which is intentional to also try and imply either sand dunes or water to help create that feeling. And we were able to see the house 3 times a day. Then one nice thing, because it's a single location, we were really able to explore that one location and spend a lot of time there and really develop it. So when you're doing a short film, if you can keep it smaller, you'll be able to develop it more and have a greater depth to your themes and really enhance the themes. One of the simple things I'm always amazed, I continue to be amazed by all the people I work with and how brilliant they all are and how their brilliance is compounds and just it makes things better. This first shot, this is a paint over by Jim Finn that is one of the art directors at Disney. And he took my basic setup that I've been working with and have been developing with other people, and then he did a quick, he was like, yeah, Kevin, can I play with it a little bit? I have a couple ideas. And sure, Jim, you're brilliant, take a look at it. And there were a couple things that they were so simple and yet so brilliant, and they completely made it better. The asphalt out front was originally kind of a warmer shade of asphalt, and Jim took it and he said, Kevin, you need to make that asphalt blue. You need to cool down the color of the asphalt, because what's important for us to look at is the hot, warm driveway. And because I had this just slightly a warmer shade of asphalt, it was making everything feel warm, and it was de-emphasizing, because it just made everything look warm. And by taking this, making it cooler, suddenly the driveway read hot. And so I listened to other people. There's always brilliance. We also had this idea of, in the night shot, of this moon rising. And it was kind of a symbol of hope that, Dan wasn't dead. That the light comes on. It's also a symbol of hope that, he's not gone, which is why the light is sort of yellow. And the porch light is also yellow. There's sort of beacons of hope that he's still around. But we got into the shot, and we realized, if you look carefully in the movie, Dan sort of fades out. He sort of disappears over that shot. And because the moon was rising, you never saw Dan disappear. So we're all sitting there looking at the shot and going, oh, crap, moon idea, bad.
Yeah.
So
we all looked at the shot in the theater because we can use the facilities after hours. So we sit in a big Starbucks and we're looking at it, and we're literally all just staring at the moon. We're like, that's so cool. And we're like, yeah, I think we're supposed to be looking at him, though.
Well, I think it's someone goes, are we supposed to be looking at the moon?
Yeah, that's the other thing is we always phrase things as questions where someone probably should have said, guys, we're supposed to be looking at the moon. It was like, should we be looking at Dan, the character? Oh, yeah, we should. Yeah. And then we had to lose the moon.
Its moon was completely upstaging Dan. So if you look at the film, the lighting for that shot is all coming from the moon, but you can't see.
Now it's just coming from a really bright street light.
Exactly. It was funny. Another thing that was really interesting and intentional with the lighting scheme, and Jim helped to design this, is that if you notice in the daytime shot, the lamppost shadow is pointed in one direction, and that it helps sell that it's morning and a different time of day. Not only is this kind of that nice sort of morning pink quality to it, but the shadow is intentionally in the complete opposite direction. And in both cases, the shadow is laid out so that it's really clear where you can see it. It's not just sort of laid out where it disappears into the environment. It's very much made so you see it. In order to keep our environment from having to get built so much, we used matte paintings to fill in the gaps behind it, which is a great trick for adding a whole bunch on, which you don't have to build. So here's the two matte paintings that Adil did. One is the Tahunga direction, and then one is the Spielberg direction, which I call the Santa Clarita direction, where it looks all nice and perfectly manicured and homeowner association quality kind of place. One of the things, again, with working with Jim Finn and getting his eyes on things, is we had all these wonderful houses, and they all looked really nice. They had nice, clean front yards, and Jim, I remember asking, and doing the question thing, he was like, well, is this film really about the houses, or is it about plants? And so he goes, you need to put more plants in the front yards. So that's why you can't practically even see the houses, because there's so much plants going down the street. So I, again, also noticed there's no cars, which also was an economy thing, because I said, we don't need to build any cars for this film. Also, if you look down the street and you're looking down there and it's supposed to be about plants, if a car was there, the car would completely block all the plants.
Yeah, so it's always, as you're adding things, we call it scope creep, right?
Yeah.
So as you're adding things in a movie, especially if you're doing your own short, you always have to tie it back to story. You have to ask yourself, what am I getting from this thing I'm adding, right? And if you don't have a really good reason that complements that story, don't add it. And that we ask ourselves that as we're doing the movies at work, where we'll be doing it and they're like, well, now we added this huge galactic battle, and it's like, well, do we need that? Does it further the story? Sometimes they say yes, but it's a good question to ask.
Yeah. Kevin? Yeah. I just noticed something also with cinematography and using different lens. We are using very long lens on the Tahunga and on the left side, and we don't need a lot of background, because when you have long lens, it's squashing the background, and the matte painting is very small. But when you are using on the opposite way, when you have Alps and things like that, we are using wide lens to get more depth and perspective, and we need much more background. The painting is big. That's very interesting. Yeah. I just noticed that today.
In fact, we're right into layout, which is coming into your area.
Good intro.
Perfect.
Perfect intro.
One of the main ways that we work to help sort of develop the film is building a real low-res version of the set. So you can see here is the really quick version of the set, built in about a day, and then first version of the character with kind of the concepts of what this guy might look like and basic proportions. And then I did a quick pose on him so we could start plugging him in to different shots and scoping out the set. And that's right about the time that JCP came on.
And I saw Kevin arriving with like a pile of 15 prints with camera in position of dandelion. I don't know what's exactly a T-pose for a dandelion, but something like that. And not very expressive, and didn't describe at all the action. Sometimes the guy is kind of walking pose or something else, but where is going? I say, okay, I need to do something, because storyboard for layout is very important, because we are hugging the story, we are starting to create all the scenes and starts to glue that together, make some logic, starting to decide for rules, which kind of angle, like just, I did give a little bit of test of that, like on the dark side, or Tahunga side, we use long lens, make your feeling of claustrophobia, like a prison and not a place you want to stay, and wide lens on the other side, say, wow, to start to create space and a happy place to go. And definitely you have the shot with the kind of like the Hitchcock camera move with when you are doing a zoom and a dolly. Like the zoom is pushing the background far from you, and the dolly, it's keeping the dandelion in place. Like it's a mix on dolly and zoom. It's kind of a Hitchcock camera move. And this move starts to open, give some hope, and give some distance. And also the second thing, also say, wow, I have a big distance to go through. Yeah. Okay, rules. And when the rules is done and things like that, definitely we need storyboard. And the storyboard really didn't exist. And I told Kevin, you have to, because it's not a dialogue, I cannot not read the dialogue, you have to play it. Sorry, Kevin, but you have to be the dandelion. Yeah. And I built very quickly a little flower's head around. I didn't do that, but
we spent an evening and did some shots, and I performed the role of the dandelion. And then JCP took his camera phone and filmed me acting out the dandelion from the different vantage points that we knew we would want to see the shots in.
I thought, yes, that's something very important. And if you want to direct a movie or be a director, how you can pass on what the concept, what's an idea? And nobody saw an idea. It's completely abstract. How this idea transform to picture, to words, and how to express what's your idea inside your ideas.
For our feature movies, we actually we do screenings of our feature movies every 12 weeks. So we literally reboard the entire movie, depending upon what phase we're in. Sometimes there's production because we've been putting the movie into production, but when you're working and you don't have storyboard artists, because there weren't any available to help us, you do what you have to do. I mean, and that's, when you're making your own shorts, you do what you have to do. We now all have, HD cameras in our pockets, so this is an elegant solution.
Not very elegant for Kevin.
It can be goofy, but it definitely tells the story, and it gave JCP what he needed.
Very useful
to
for
move
me.
Forward
After
with
that, I really know what I have to do, and also we decide shooting that. Say, hey, Kevin, why not to do another shot like that? And I put notes on those prints, and I go back to my desk at lunchtime and on Saturday, and then I did the animatic.
What was funny is I took all those shots that we did, I took them home and I edited them together in just a really simple, free editing software. And I came in with this little movie and I said, don't show this to anyone. And it's me performing the role of Dan.
March across the driveway.
But it was,
it was very important to do it. For me, it was making everything clear in my head. I was reading inside the head of this guy.
But it allowed us to get something out in an evening, because when you're doing something in your spare time, every spare moment counts. Because if you're going to spend a week doing storyboards, or say a month doing storyboards.
Did those little movie was used by editorial too, or no? Give to
no. The little performance one that I did was you're the only one
that's
the
only one. Okay, I'm the lucky guy.
What was neat though is that after that, he took my horrible performance, but at least it sort of spelled out like here's what we're thinking the film should be from the different camera angles that we talked about. He was then able to, with the little screen caps that I had done from the different camera views and the performance, go back through and then take our little weed character and with this rough rig, put it through the performance. So we could see, like, how does this actually work? Do we have a story here that we can tell? And we took his layout. We got our editor, Michael, who took all those shots, edited them all together into a form, and we put a temp score on it. And we suddenly looked at it and went, we have a little movie here. And we have a little movie that works. And we have a gift. Right? Yeah, it was a wonderful moment where we looked and went, wow, that's what we're thinking. And I'm looking at going, yep, that's what's in my head, something like that. And that became a great tool to start showing people, one, that we were serious about making it. Because one of the toughest things in the world, if you've never proven to anyone that you can make an animated film, is convincing them that their time will be worth spending helping you on your film. And that's really hard. So having something to say, look, here's what we want to do. And we're not just asking you to help us on the film. We're asking you to help us by doing this. We need you to do these shots. We need you to help animate this. We need you to help build this. You know, suddenly it became much more specific.
Maybe
that's when we turned to Brad, and Brad starts rounding up people to help make the movie.
Yeah, Kevin actually came. Did you want to say something real quick?
Yes, just of the animation. Like this little animation here is the layout animation. Already character is tough to us to animate character, but a plant with 1,000 billions handle everywhere, all the petal can move and things else. Oh my goodness, I could not do it. It's way too complex. And it was kind of very simple, because it was very complex. And passing, when layout go to animation, it's something magical arrive. This kind of crappy motion turned into life, and that's, I don't know, each time on any movie, my art is really, I don't know, I'm reaching something like an emotion, definitely a great emotion, like live arrive. And also on this movie, on big production, the studio is organized with tools named post page, an animator before the story was approved and starts to figure out faces, mouse expression for letters, posing, also cycle of run, of walk. And on these shots, thanks, we are kind of lucky, we get one run. That's it. And I have to do all the pose, all the stuff, but it was fun.
So, where I came in is they had completed layout, and there was about half of the shots had been cast in animation, and the producer that was on with Kevin left the studio. And Kevin came to me and said, hey, I'm looking for animators and I need help because internally there's a term for this production, it's called a co-op. The studio doesn't help you find people. Like when you're working on a big project, you go to artist managers who run departments, then they tell you who's available, and you strategize and book people. On a movie like this, they literally say, sorry, it's a co-op, you gotta recruit yourself. So Kevin came to me, because I'm working on Wreck-It Ralph 2, we're working on the same movie, and my position is to budget, schedule, crew, and then run the daily operations of the movie. That's what an associate producer does at Disney. And then I took a look at it, and I said, why didn't you ask me to produce this?
I should let you know. Brad and I have a long history.
Yeah, we go back 10 years, more than that, 15.
More than that, a long time. And Brad's been my producer on 3 of the films I've done at Disney.
Yeah.
So
the Big Hero 6, Zootopia, and now Wreck-It Ralph.
So he's always been busy producing other films, and so I didn't ask him because I was like, well, he's busy. One of the lessons out of this that keeps coming back is, ask everybody, because some people will tell you no, and then people that you never think would tell you yes will tell you yes. So ask everybody, because you never know who's going to tell you yes, and you may be in for some wonderful surprises. Yeah. So I asked Brad, and he said yes.
Yeah, and so one of the first things we talked about, we watched it together, and then we kind of strategized, and just from a general approach of production, for one, we needed some goals. We needed to just set some deadlines, whether it's always better to have goals and miss them a little bit than to not have goals at all. And then the other thing was, we really were missing some critical leadership on the movie. Even though it was a short, animation, as Wayne will speak to in a moment, is what makes these things come alive, and what Luke just said. Right. So the first thing I said is, would you be willing to get an animation supervisor? And Hin Min was our animation supervisor, and she had worked on all the previous shows I've been on, and she was wonderful. So she immediately popped into my brain and said, would you be willing, Kevin, would you be willing to look at this? And when you do that, you're also introducing new energy, but also you could be going back into shots too, because if she has a different vision, we're gonna have to get into it. So she ended up being amazing and wonderful, and we could not have done this movie without her. So that's kind of where I got involved, and then we kind of started moving along. And what's next?
Just real quick before we pass it to Wayne.
Yep.
Wayne is another example of someone I never thought would say yes to work on this film, This guy helped animate Elsa. He was the supervisor on Elsa.
Yeah.
So it's like to have someone of that caliber say, yes, I'll do a shot for your film, was like, wow.
Yeah,
Christmas.
We were both like, when Hinman told us that he was interested, we were both like, no way. Really?
But when JCP came on, I was like, I just got my Christmas present, because I wanted so bad to have JCP do it. So yeah, work on your own film, you'll find it, when people say yes, it's like Christmas. So it's wonderful. Just so everybody knows, the rig was done by a woman at work, now I'm forgetting her name, Joy Johnson. And she, because of the way these sort of things work, it's a spare time type thing. I called one person, asked her to rig, and I don't have time. And another person that I'd known for years, I don't have time. And then I asked, well, who do I know? Well, Joy. I love Joy. Let's ask her. And she said yes. And so she goes, I've got 2 days. Well, actually it was, I have a day. I can do it for you. And I said, well, if you're doing it in more than a day, you're overthinking it. And she took a look at the character. And just so everybody knows, like the default pose for Dan is he looks like he's in a perfect straight line. You know, like all the roots are pointing straight down, all the petals, all the leaves are pointing straight up. And then up top is just this little circle of leaves or a flower that's pointing straight up, like the front is pointing straight up. So it's very strange looking. But she took that model and put the rig into it and brought him back into the pose that was in the concept sculpt of what he was supposed to look like. And these are all the articulation points. He's got 5 arms, he's got this long neck, he's got all the petals and all the sepals are all able to be moved. The arms have 5 points of spline IK for articulation on them, but the hands have no IK because you can't put IK on a spline IK. And the feet, we were able to use a traditional sort of IK rig for those, so he could walk like a regular sort of human being. And this is what the animators would look at. I remember when I first saw the rig that she showed me, and she showed me this page, I said, okay, that's intimidating. But then the animators take it, and just like JCP said, you know, when an animator takes this pose, or this rig, and they take this little character, and you've kind of had it in your head how this thing should look, and they just like, they work their magic, you went, whoa, no. Back. Yep. Suddenly, it just comes to life. And you've got a little dandelion that's thinking and emoting, and there's an urgency, and it's cute, and it's charming, and it's everything that it needs to be. And suddenly you can say, this film's going to work. Because if anyone, any studio on the planet could make us care for something as small and insignificant as a little dandelion, it's Walt Disney Animation Studios. And I'm so grateful to the animators that came on and did stuff. And I'm so grateful to Wayne, who came on and animated probably the craziest shot.
Cool. Yeah, so I came on, I didn't know Kevin prior to this short. But he would come into my office. I share an office with Hyun Min. She was the animation supervisor. And during break time and lunch, Kevin and her would be talking over the computer and watching clips. And they were getting excited about the animation coming in, like Kevin was saying, seeing the film come to life. And I was curious. After Kevin left, I went over to Hyun Min's just where she was working, and I was wondering, so what are you guys working on over there? And she was like, oh, this short, co-op short called Weeds, and we have a few more shots that haven't been cast yet. She showed me it, and actually a co-op, like you guys were saying, you don't work on it you have no resources. You have to work on it after hours, your own time. It's like you're donating your time to work on a project. But when she showed me the story, and there was something that resonated with me. There's this idea of one generation helping out the next generation for your children, that you may have a better life. And that resonated with me. just from my great-grandparents, my grandparents, my parents. And so I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. I'd like to work on this if there's a shot, And I looked and I saw there was one that was a little complex, but I was getting really excited about it. And Kevin, when you showed in the layout,
here's the shot.
You
want to get ahead that far?
Early in the layout, there was nothing there. There was just
there. It's JCP's layout. There it is. Go back one. There you go.
Yeah, on the bottom right, it was just the basics of it. But I was like, oh, there's so much potential in this. So I was getting.
Thank you.
I was getting. No, I was getting really excited about it, and so.
Just like Kevin.
We are fun in Disney. Walking to Disney.
Yeah. So one of the things, that I guess we'll skip to the next slide.
Well, let me hit on this real quick, just so we leave this. When we were talking about the character and who it is, and we kept saying that we wanted to give this plant life, so it felt like it was alive. And one of the challenges of it was that because he has no facial expressions, all those petals, and he has 14 petals on his face, and then there's 6, and then there's 8, and then there's 6. So he's got like 28 different sort of petals that he can use to convey expression. And then we were talking about, because he has these leaves that can sort of be arms, when he pulls himself together, we can use them as arms, and he can gesture with arms. But let's also forget that he's got other leaves, and he's a plant. He's not a human. So he can use his other leaves in fashions that might not be human. And yet, when he when he pulls himself all together, let's let him read as a nice human silhouette, since he's symbolic of a human. But then when he's struggling, it sort of delves back into being a plant again. It kind of loosens up. And the main thing, of course, is like everything, he has to be appealing and fun, and we have to fall in love with this little plant from the first time we see him.
Yeah. Disney, we're always talking about appeal. Appeal.
Seeing what had been done in the previous shots, Miner had done the shot where he's gesturing, come on, and then the way that he played with the petals as if it's a blink, it was really creative. So it was really nice just to see what had been done and how the treatment of this character. So when I first started on the shot, first I talked to Kevin just to get issued. So this was where I could ask all the questions that I need to know before getting into the shot. So who is this character? And Kevin told me about the story of Dan, and I got the backstory of it, so I knew where he was coming from. I knew things about the environment that he's in. I asked about why. Okay, so he's a character. He's in the ground. I need to know: is it hard soil? Is it loose gravel? It was dry clay in this case. Who is he? Kevin was saying he's childlike. He's naive. He's an optimist. He's hopeful. It was interesting to hear how the leaves were treated. So the rear leaves, they were treated like a backpack. They were curled up. They were at a certain height because he wanted it to feel like he was going on this journey, and so it's representative of a backpack. So these are all the information that I need to know just to get the director's vision. So then, so mine is on the right. I did an exploration, hand-drawn. And the reason why, this is hand-drawn of him being, trying to pull himself out of the ground. And the reason why I do it hand-drawn first before getting into the computer is because I just looking at the rig, or not even the rig, just looking at the model, I knew oh, this looks like it might be a hard character to animate. Usually we animate either bipeds or quadrupeds, but then this looks like a character with like 6 ropes tied together, and ropes are like one of the hardest things to animate. And like we would joke about it on Moana, like, oh, who's gonna get the rope shot? It's like, oh, you got the rope shot. Oh. And this is like 6 ropes tied together. There's 5 leaves and then a stem. So yeah, already I knew like, oh, okay, I'm gonna, and I've done this in previous films as well, where if, you know, and I knew that I didn't have much time on this. You know, it's just a co-op. I wanted to get it out as soon as I could. So the fastest way to do that was to do my exploration not using the character rig. Some people, like on the left, you'll see some people do video reference. So there's Andrew Feliciano doing reference for his shot where he puts his foot down and it burns his foot. But yeah, so I like to do it hand-drawn. The reason why is because, again, I don't want to be bogged down by what the rig is able to do, or me trying to figure out a rig that I've never used before. So imagine, like, say if you're writing a poem, and you're like, oh yes, I'm inspired to write, and then your pencil breaks, and I'm like, oh man, so you sharpen your pencil, and then you can't get, you know, you're stopped. The creative flow is stopped. So it's a good thing, though, that I did this because, one, because we didn't have much time on it. If Kevin had a note, you know, I could quickly address it here in this phase, and I didn't have to worry about, you know, losing time, spending all this time just trying to figure out the rig. Also, when I got to animating it in CG, we can go on to the next one, I discovered that yes, the rig was great for most of the shots, but this was a one-off situation where, you know, he's doing all these things that he only does in this one shot. So I had to come up with creative ways to actually pull some of this stuff off. So I made separate deformers, you know, just to be able to wrap himself to pull. And if I had started with the rig to explore these ideas first, I probably never would have come up with those ideas. So that's the benefit of, you know, finding quick ways, kind of like what Kevin was doing, filming himself, you know, quick ways to explore and just to plan out. And
from a production perspective, we're really lucky that Wayne works this way, because we ended up coming into getting down to a deadline where we ended up doing all of our sound using the 2D drawing, and we locked into that. And Wayne said, no, I can hit it in 3D. Don't worry about it. We'll be okay. And so we literally did our full mix, our everything.
Did the Foley, we did the mix and everything, all to the drawing.
And then only after all of our post was basically done, we cut in that last shot and then did a color timing pass. So
one thing, I remember when you first showed me the plan for when I did the shot, I went, oh my God, the rig isn't designed to do that. And he goes, don't worry, I'll figure out how to make it do that. Which I think that's one of the things as a scalability thing. We did the rig in 2 days. She said 1 day, but then she got really into it and she spent another day on it. And it was like we did our best guess in those 2 days of what this character would do based on the layout. So it's one of those, like, you only have a short amount of time. So with this kind of shot, it just makes sense to do it as a one-off.
Yeah, no, Joy did a great job just in the limited time she had. Just curious, how many animators are in the room? Okay, a few.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
Cool. So one of the things I did first, before I did any drawings, I had the camera, I had the character. What I would do is I would pose out the character in CG, and just to use as a size reference. If you guys are planning to do hand-drawn planning, I shoot out an image and use that kind of like the background plate. So then I would have, you know, just the size of the character. Then I would draw, so I kind of know the staging of it. And then, so we can go on to the next.
There's that one.
Yeah.
That one.
And then, oh, yeah, there we go. So you could see like how this is compared with the final shot. You can see how closely I stuck with the initial 2D planning.
And I would just mention, if you're doing this type of thing where you're either breaking a rig or you're doing a complement to a rig, like the deformer, you want to render that as soon as humanly possible, because as you're working on your projects, you want to do test renders along the way. Just do first, middle, and last frames as you're going, because what you don't want to do is get into your render crunch and discover that all those things you did to get you through the last 3 departments are now all broken in your render. So just a really good note is just do test renders along the way. Kevin was actually, the wonderful thing about Disney, one of the many wonderful things about Disney, is if you want a work at home station, they give you one, and it ties straight back to the phone. It's literally a mirrored station from your one. So he would go home and he'd work all weekend, and he would fire off all the shots. So we were rendering, he was rendering all along the way, and I'm production, so I'm like watching the queue. And a little funny note is they give us allocations at work, so we have a big render farm, but they give us allocations, and his allocation had like 6 procs. We have thousands, we have tens of thousands. And so I would look at the queue on the weekend, and it said, you know, the line item in the show, it says weeds, and it says currently running at 200,000% of allocation. And I'd be like, yes!
We were fortunate because Ralph pushed back, so suddenly there was a lot of room on the render farm. So we were able to, I think that's one of the reasons we were able to get the film done. Yeah. So we had the bandwidth.
Oh, one quick thing about this. Again, real quick, the reason why doing 2D planning also is great is just one, you can iterate really quick. So it's about clarity. In this, you know, he's pulling himself out of the ground, and I really wanted to make sure that it was clear, and it was entertaining. So you get to play and like try out different things very quickly. And hopefully, you know, the audience finds enjoyment out of it and doesn't see the pain that went through to make it, but, you know, just the fun.
When you work on features, do you do this just to yourself, or do you actually show it to other people? Do you show 2D to other people?
I usually don't, but in the case of Moana, there was one shot, a very long shot that I had to do that I didn't want to spend the time, so I didn't want to get too far and have it not work. So I had Moana, she was paddling out, and I thumbnailed it out, very rougher than this, just to get the beats and the timing down with the music.
Cool.
And I showed that, yeah.
Awesome.
But yeah, just like also Kevin was saying, and you know, JCP was saying, like when it goes from layout to animation, just going over to now tech anim and effects, it really, it's fun seeing the progression. And
I love the seeing the movie building, and it's kind of building by layer. You have the first layer, and then wow, another coat, another layer was making it even better and nicer and shinier, and that's the pleasure working in this making movies. I think I really like this process.
Yeah. I'm really lucky because I can, depending upon my schedule during the day, I can go to any review I want, and so I'll be able to see lighting, I'll see animation in the morning, and then I can go to lighting in the afternoon, or I can go to layout. And sometimes I will just, if I've had a hard day, I'll just go watch lighting or anim, because it's so amazing. And I actually had to tell the lighting artist once, because I was showing up a lot, and sometimes when I show up a lot, people think something's going wrong. and one of the lighters said to me, "Brad, is everything okay?" And I said, "Yes, I'm hiding. I'm hiding from my other meetings. I love lighting. This is wonderful."
One of my favorite stories about lighting is John Lasseter we would come and review shots from Moana, and there'd be storyboard, final shot, and he'd be like, storyboard, holy fuck! Wow, that looks amazing! Storyboard. Whoa!
Yeah.
That's a little bit the process
so
of CG. CG is kind of very plasticky and terrible. Like layout are not lucky because no render with like a super render farm and things like that. It's like just D-blast, D-view and things like that. And then, yes, exactly, the final image arrives. Ah! It's like freaking beautiful suddenly. Like a something also very cool on this shot, on the curve of emotion. You just go through like a kind of a roller coaster of emotion, from super sadness, I need to leave this place, I can die, we can all die, oh yes, we are dying. And then this shot is a very pivot shot. Pivotal. Like this shot is a transition between this kind of sadness, or everybody is dying around you, say, okay, I need to get hope. And I think the animation carries that. And to get the audience extract from the emotion of sadness to an emotion of hope. This is a brilliant shot.
Yeah. Wayne shared this quote from Brad Bird that's up at the top, which is ask yourself questions and answer them in ways that delight you. I remember he told me that thought. I just think that's an amazing quote for all of us planning films. All right. And the next part is effects. And
so from the very emotional stuff to the very boring technical stuff now. So who better to talk about this than the German in the team? No, I mean, did anyone notice that the last shot actually had some animation apart from the dandelion? I'm not sure. Actually, there is quite a bit in it. So if you want to go back...
I have that shot. Do you want to do that one first?
Oh, it comes later too. Okay. No, yeah, that's fine. So I was first asked by Kevin to do the sprinklers in the movie. And that turned out to be a little bit more than towards the end. So basically I was... yes, it was a lot sprinkler work, but it's also basically most of the environmental effects. There were a few other effects artists on the show too, and some of them were actually amazing supervisors from Moana, and like Dale, for example, he was like the head of effects. He did like the heat deformation setup, like that is, as you see, is like, for example, whole of geometry has to be generated for that. Or Erin, she was another lead on Moana on the shorelines. But they only, because of what the co-op is, they only could dedicate like so much time to it, right? I already moved on to more important stuff. But I had time, so I was like, from just the sprinklers, it slowly grew. So I mean, first was like, Kevin said, okay, do a cycle or do a duration of sprinklers for like, 300 frames, and we like stick it into every shot. That's it, the sprinklers just going in the background. I was like, well, it's easy enough. The sprinklers is like, basically in the technical language we would say ballistic particles. It's about like one of the most easy things you can do in effects, right? But then suddenly, and it was like, oh yeah, they land in the grass, they disappear in the grass, no big deal. But suddenly there were close-ups in the movie, and then there was like some ground interaction, right? And then the sprinklers had to turn on and off. And also the water doesn't look the same from this angle than it looked from that angle, because it's a different thing when you do particles compared to everything else in the movie, which is basically surfaces.
The sprinklers weren't just a continuous stream, they were rotating.
Yeah, so they were like actually animation on it, but I mean, that was the one thing I was like getting in the beginning, where I was like, okay, yeah, they have to rotate, okay, that's also kind of, okay, not like too hard, but it's also a problem. So I understand that you guys mostly doing like still images here, or like reels kind of stuff, animation tests, but when you like have to populate a whole movie, it's very short, like with effects, you have to somehow think about the pipeline. I guess that's the boring part, but Kevin assured me that you guys might be interested in it. So we're using Maya, but for the effects we're also using software called Houdini. Does anyone know Houdini here? Yeah?
All right, nods.
So this is what Disney Animation and many other big effects studios use for the effects work. And luckily what we really benefited from is that the pipeline was set up for us, so it was the most easy thing to just generate your effects in Houdini and then get them like to Maya and get them rendered there. Because it turned out to be not only particles after all and water. Then suddenly Kevin was like, okay, there's also, I guess that dandelion is like boiling while trying to cross the driveway, so it would be nice to have some steam in it too.
Oh yeah, there's
and the steam turned out to be like a little bit a bigger thing because it needed to be like pretty interactive, right? So you need to time it with animation, certain parts. You wanted to have a dramatic kind of development in there, like more like really like violent steam in the beginning, and then like kind of more really kind of that desperation in the end. But as I said, I didn't want to talk too much about emotional things since I was mostly dealing with like technical issues and that. And that responsibility grew a little bit into being some sort of in a VFX advisory role because I'm like really like to pay attention to little like technical details. And I'm not sure if Kevin is going to tell that anecdote.
Oh, I'll tell that story
also later. But I then suddenly started to step into territory that I was not exactly booked for. And was like, oh, this could look better, you know, with a little bit of effort there. You could like kind of maybe replace those like dandelion seeds with like real hair, you know, as before he was like doing an alpha map on it, and it was like just not holding up close up. And I was like, hey, Kevin, it would be really sad if they're kind of important in the movie, the seeds, you know, if they look like crap.
All right, let me tell this story. Or find him. It's the classic trap that I've seen, that I have fallen into many a times, or I've seen producers fall into.
Often instigated by the producer. Yeah.
Usually it's the producer
But I didn't do it this time.
No, I think it's like it's been ingrained in my brain so many times that I did it myself. And I said, it's for this shot, where he turns into the puffs. And I said, well, Kevin, do you really need to grow hair on the end of there? Or could you not do a card and just do transparency on it? And that would look surely just as well and probably be faster and cheaper. And I said, well, okay, Kevin. I put on my artist hat. I went, I could do that. So I did that. And I spent an evening implementing that. And it looked okay. And so I spent another evening working on it, and I convinced myself that it was okay. And then yeah, you know where this is going. And then the next evening, it's this shot, because there's only one other shot that you see the puffs in. And Hendrik had just given me a new version of the water. And I was lighting it, because we were really struggling with how do we make this the water look the way we want it to look in the lighting. And he comes by, looks at the water, and he goes, oh, the water's looking better. It's a shame the seeds look like crap. And it was one of our first, like, you just started doing all the water stuff, so it was early on in the production. But
you need people to be honest,
yes.
Right? So Hendrik ended up in a bunch of our reviews. We did a huge review at the end where we got almost every shot was through comp. And we sat and just looked at it together. We ordered some pizza in, and we just watched it. And Hendrik came, and it was a contribution of like 4 or 5 people, and we all were noodling everything like a dailies, and it was wonderful. So
the thing that's great, that was so great about that moment, is when as an artist you're doing so much on your film, it's very easy to become in this little bubble. And you can convince yourself that what you're doing is good, when in fact it's crap. And it's good to have someone that, especially if they're 6'4", 200 and something pound German, that comes into your bubble and says, that's crap. And I looked at him and I went, you're just worried because it's going to make your water look bad. But then I realized this person had donated so much time to making the film better that it's like, how could I let him down by letting my part ruin his shot? And so I said, okay, I got to step it up. So
I'm also trying not to give like random advice, right? So I think at this point it's important that you kind of know what the implications of your suggestions are, right? At Disney we usually don't have that. The directors say whatever they want. right there because there's no limitation. And if John Lasseter says what he wants, like then a whole movie gets like pushed back a year, right? So, but
that's not true. That is not true.
No, I get
okay,
the
but it's like so. But that's why we have, for example, the role of a VFX supervisor in our movies too, right? Because that's like sitting in between the director and like kind of the technical people executing everything. It's like going to say, okay, this would be a major thing if we change this now. So I was like trying essentially to tell Kevin things that from my perspective, because I was only suggesting things where I kind of knew what the impact was. I was like, okay, here is doable. We have a pretty robust, pretty convenient pipeline for this, you know. You can just throw that on there. I think it was
Here's the punchline with that whole thing with the card, is after he said that looked like crap, I said, okay. So the next night, I sat down, I grew the hairs on the tip.
You built everything and then grew the hairs.
I already had, all you need to do is just take the cards, put them into a thing like, don't render these. And then I picked the faces, I grew my hair on them. And in one evening, I not only had it working right, it looked right. And the next day he comes by and he's looking at his wife and goes, oh, that looks better now. But it was amazing. Like, I tried to shave and do it the shortcut way. And it took me 2 evenings to convince myself that what was crap was good. When in one evening, I did it the right way and it looked great. So sometimes the lesson is don't cut the corner, don't be your own producer, because sometimes the producer will tell you, cut the corner, it'll look just as good, when in fact it doesn't. So, yeah, and we all fall into it, even artists. So.
I try not to do that anymore. I've learned my lesson too many times. When an artist tells me it's going to take a certain amount of time, I say, well, if you can do it faster, that'd be great, but thanks, okay, here we go.
Yeah. All right, back to our water.
So, yeah, so after that, I kind of gave advice to like a few visual effects things that stood out to me. I think the grass was another thing, and where it was first like, okay, something's not right with the grass, it didn't got rendered as like ribbons or something and get rendered as like kind of primitives or like yeah. So, but these little things, you also have to know where to stop. You have to say, this is now kind of, it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb anymore, and we can. Now, you want to do more. You want to do more sometimes, but you have to tell yourself, okay, this is now a good baseline where we can leave it, and that's how I try to treat the effects also in it. Yeah, in the end, as I said, many more effects artists were contributing, and it was. I'm happy with the result, and
yeah.
Yeah, so there were a few things, I think also like more technical things, like for example the motion blur was an issue with the water because we were so close. The particles, they're essentially just these like blurred streaks, so they react really different to lighting, but then they like hit the ground, but it's like, so there's also no direct correlation. It was actually done by Aaron Adams, another effects artist at Disney, who did like the ground interaction. There's not even a direct correlation between the water, the ballistic water, and then the stuff that's hitting the ground. It's just like you have the water in the air, and then you have the ground interaction, so you can really cheat it this way. But then they have to look the same because the water in the air is particles. The one on the ground are little like kind of shapes, geometric shapes, and they look different. They react different to lighting. So in the end, we were like kind of going a little bit down the easy route and saying, okay, we blur these a lot. That makes it like nice and work together. But then also someone actually figured out, I think that was also left over from Moana, how to change the shader on the ground to make it actually look wet where they land. And I think that was then all tying together.
Yeah, we got all that working at the end too. One of the things that, on the director end of it, the water, it was one of those things, well, what do we want these sprinklers to look like? Because at the distance you see it, the ones I grew up with were those ones that are just a continuous stream. And it was like, well, that would be kind of boring to look like. It's like if it's just spraying. And so I was out back at the new building at Disney because we had gotten over to there by the time we were doing the things. And I was looking at our sprinklers on the lawn, and this is one of the ones that we have, which are those ones that they rotate. and you see the little things move. And they had this sort of neat sort of like, almost sort of thing like this, and I said, wouldn't it be cool if they're doing that kind of movement, almost like it's beckoning, come over here, come over here. So that was the kind of the speck on the water was like, you know, I wanted it to have almost this beckony, sort of hypnotic quality that just, it's sort of this siren call to our little guy. And then, yeah, Aaron really came through with the water droplets on the ground because they look like mortar shells hitting all around him, but he's just not going to get to the water. Yeah, the steam.
I left the symbolism over to Kevin. I was more like kind of make sure that the water looks like water.
he would listen to all my blab about it. You know, and the steam was important. Like at the beginning, when he first steps on the thing, it's a big steam burst. But you know, at the end, he's just barely sizzling because there's just almost no steam left in him. Because once the steam is up, it's, you know, when the steam runs out,
okay, it's almost dry.
He's done. So, in the seeds. We were fortunate, like he said, about the Moana effects, because Dale was able to get all these wonderful, like, heat, these, I don't even know what it actually was.
Heat distortion that gets used. You render a geometry, or actually that's just a preview. You render the geometry as a volume that gives you kind of distortion coordinates for compositing, and that's how you do it.
It basically puts out a normal map almost.
Yeah, yeah, like
the
normal
different
map, yeah,
RGB,
exactly.
and that's what I used to comp it and get the thing. But it was neat. So yeah, there's the final imagery. You can see like the heat distortion. We had an element that could be put in a comp and then brought in, and that would distort it would offset the image on X, Y, and Z. So. All right, lighting. I had spent the summer before the project, before we started on Weeds, helping out in lighting of Moana, because Moana was suddenly up against this massive deadline, and modeling was light, but there was a real need in lighting. And so it was like, well, Kevin, would you be interested in trying to do lighting? And I was like, well, I've never done lighting before, but okay, sure, I probably could do this. And it was a really amazing experience, because like Brad said, when you go to lighting dailies, you're seeing the final shots in the movie, and you're seeing it, you go, wow, this looks like a real movie, as opposed to modeling where everything is usually gray. So it was a neat experience. And one of the things that contributed to actually started going, I think we could do a short, because I started going, I could do the modeling, I could do the texture work, I could do the look, and I could do the lighting on it. So it's like, you know, it seems suddenly like it wouldn't be that hard to do a film. But it was harder. So then my naive notion, it wouldn't be that hard. But what's kind of cool here is I pulled this out because these are all the shots in the film. These are the 30 shots, and it's kind of what, you know, in typical, in the lighting world at Disney, we would call it a color script. And it's interesting to see, like, we didn't spend time developing a color script, because ours was kind of like a, you know, let's go and we'll figure it out later kind of film. But it landed like a traditional Disney color script, where it's got, you know, a nice balanced lighting at the beginning. It's nice high key lighting. It's got nice high key lighting at the end. Everything's all nice and balanced and cool and nice balance of forms.
Sometimes also something is nice also on those keys. You can see also a little bit of one establishing rules for composition. Each time we are looking at the bad place, the Tawonga place, or like the sad place, see how the sky and the horizon is very high on screen. This means it's very no breathing, no hope, and all the other direction, how the horizon, it's low, and you see more sky. Those kind of composition also is telling the story. Well, Kevin was saying, like, any ingredient you put on your picture have to stay the story. Like the effects, you don't want to speak about emotion on the effects, but the emotion was telling the story. When everybody, like, passed away, just a little dust closed, like, really make your emotion even stronger. Same thing when the guys passed away, not reaching this goal, the sprinkler stop and close. All those little things really tell the story with effects, with sound. Also the gag, when the guy is running, up shot to make the guy strong, say, yeah, I can do it. And then the animation did very good, say, wow, proud attitude just at the end. Music also had a little da-da-da, like a, no, what's the music had? You do better than me, but a bit horn or something like that. And boom, big shot, big profile, the little guys running on the, and everybody is laughing. Like, I was speaking about layering. That's layering. Layering is first the story, and each department say, how I can tell the story, how my tools, how the effects, how the composition, how the animation is telling the story. And when the director is leading all those departments to have on the final frame the emotion right and telling the story, I think you have this kind of little jewel.
Yes. The one thing I was going to say, in the lighting thing, just real quick on this, notice how it tends to be balanced, and then as it gets down towards the end, the lighting becomes more dramatic and more extreme until you get this
second act darkness that happens.
And
then we're at night.
No more sky.
No more sky.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. We landed just right where a traditional color script would land. It always is amazing to me how many lights it actually ends up taking in a set to light it. When I started helping out lighting, I had the naive notion that you put your sun in there and maybe a fill light, and voila, get done. Voila.
I get it.
No, we had about 14 lights in our set to do everything from our 2 sunlights, because I had to make the sun, the key light, a little lower to get past the pedals so his face was lit. But when I put that one on, it cast too long a shadow behind him. So there's one light that's just lighting our character, and another key light that's lighting their scene. And then all the other bounce lights from the driveway bouncing heat up onto the character, onto the walls, all the rim lights and everything. So it took about 14 different lights. There's even a special light that's just linked to the water to backlight it. So it has this really nice sort of magical glow. Did I skip the music? Okay. Quick things on sort of the storytelling. I went to film school, so it's kind of like, this was kind of a neat trip down memory lane and thinking back to all the things I learned in film school about movie making. And as they've all said, one of the things that's kind of fun about this film is it's a deceptively simple story that tells a universal truth. It's a story that, it's on its base level, it's about a dandelion that wants to get somewhere. It's a journey story from A to B. And we're all traveling in one direction to get over there. And what's interesting about it is, because it's so simple, we were able to really explore it and really develop it out, and then really make it something special. We used the classic question-answer or POV technique in filmmaking, where you show a picture of a person with a blank expression on their face, and then you intercut that with a steak. And what the human mind interprets that to mean is that the guy's hungry. Or if you take that same exact blank expression guy, and you show that guy looking at a little child, you think he has compassion. In ours, we show this blank sort of expression, dandelion, we show water, and immediate, as an audience, we go, oh, he wants water. So using that helped to really tell the story, even though our character has no facial expressions. We used the lenses to convey scale and distance. As JCP was saying, when we're shooting at him in the hunger direction, we used an 80 millimeter lens, which kept everything kind of feeling like it was crushing in on you. At the beginning, when he's looking across the driveway, we used like about a 50 millimeter lens. So it just felt like it was just, right next door. After he touches the ground, and we realized that it's going to be a longer journey, from there on we used like about 20 millimeter lenses, or somewhere around the 20s, so that everything felt like it was really far. So I thought that was just, it was a brilliant idea when you said, let's try this as it. For camera movement, we have 2 distinct points of view in the film. There's sort of this omniscient, godlike observer that's sort of representative of the audience. You see it in the first shot, you see it when all the other guys are dead and Dan's just sort of looking at him, and you see it again in the shot after he sacrifices the seeds, and we just sort of pull back with it. But then the other point of view is the sort of down in the dirt with Dan stuff. And when we were working on it, we decided let's have the vocabulary for the camera be very specific. Like when he's stuck in the ground, the camera is like on a tripod, and the
camera is stuck with him.
Yeah, the camera's stuck with him, and it can move, it can tilt, it can pivot, but it can't actually move. And then once he pulls himself up out of the ground, then the camera is free to move with him. And that's when we introduced the truck for the first time into the camera moves. So like when he takes off running, the camera moves with him, and you really feel that dynamic shift because we've saved that type of camera vocabulary till then. So think about when you're working on your films, think about how the camera can help with the storytelling and how the character drives the camera. We got to use the Hitchcock dolly zoom, which every film school student wants to use at one point in their filmmaking career. And then the other thing that the voices of some of my old film instructors came back to me, which was, if you have something to say, say something. If you're going to do it, wait, if you're going to, wait, if you're going to, if you're going to show it, say it, or something like that. If you're going to make, if you're going to make it, say it. If you're going to make something, say something, is the old film school quote. If you're going to go to the trouble of making this film, and you're going to spend all this time doing it, and all this blood, and convince people to chip in and make this film, make it something that means something. Make it something that's going to have something to say to people, that's going to have a positive impact. So that was, because I remember my professors saying, here we have all these amazing tools, and sometimes people don't even say anything with them. And I was like, wow, now I feel challenged. So I was like, I thought that was amazing. And then one of my instructors, one of his other big things was, so what? You know, you get done with your film, so what? What does the audience think? You know, what did they learn? What did it mean? Did it mean, you know, love conquers all? Did it mean, you know, Father knows best? Does it have some little kernel of human truth to it? So I pass that on as advice from Richard Walters at UCLA. You know, so what? Think about, if you're making your film, what does it mean? Why have you told this story? And what did you want to do? And this leads us to music. And Dale was our brilliant composer that worked tirelessly on making the score fit the film.
Can you hear me now? Sweet. So I guess I'll start off by talking about how this instrument wound up functioning as the musical centerpiece for the score for Kevin's film, and also came to represent much of Dan, the Dandelion's on-screen time. So when Kevin and I first started talking about the music for this film, I think there were 3 words that stuck with me. One of them was organic, the other was acoustic, and the other was guitar. And other things came up in our communication that made it really clear that he didn't want any synthetic, overly mechanical sounds propelling his score. So at some point, instrument choice became an issue with what he'd mentioned with organic, acoustic, and guitar. So the first thing I tried to do was come up with some kind of a central musical motif for Dan right there, initially with a regular full-size acoustic guitar, but it quickly became clear that a big, full-bodied acoustic was a little bit, I guess, dwarfing the image of Dan on screen, who's a small dandelion. So I switched gears and sought out another possible instrument. I do have a pretty large collection of funky stringed instruments of different sizes. So at some point I thought, well, maybe a ukulele would be the right small choice. But part of me wanted to veto that immediately because that is such a common instrument in cute music, and some people might even say it's overused. I really wanted to try to find another path to go down. And so the crazy coincidence at that moment occurred. I just received this instrument right around the same time Kevin and I were having this discussion. Again, it's a charango. It's from South America, specifically Bolivia. And given that the subtext of this film, it's really all motivated as a reaction against the certain people's negative feelings towards immigrants and immigration globally. And so when this arrived, I immediately thought, well, this is emigrated to the US officially. I felt that this was like its own little immigrant. So I sought to employ this instrument and quickly came up with a couple motifs. And this main one here came to represent much of Dan's movement on the screen. So that's a reoccurring figure that happens quite a bit at the beginning and other moments when Dan comes back. Several other moments in the film where this instrument comes up, another motif that seemed to help move things along during a tragic period early on when Dan first realizes many of his friends around him are dying from baking in the sun and are unable to get themselves out of the ground, all wilting around him. But Dan is, by his nature, an optimistic plant. So there's a little bit of an optimistic theme right here that I popped in. And then many more moments when the instrument came back. Probably one of the dramatic high points of the film, when you watched it, you probably noticed as he's trying to make his way across the driveway, he, with the sun beating down on him on his quest for water, basically runs out of steam, and in his final moments, rain starts to come down on him, but he doesn't make it. There's a moment in there where the charango comes back, and it's, I think, the only time where I played it in an authentic fashion, where it's sort of a rippling, quickly arpeggiated sound, where your fingers are kind of going through chords. So I'll give you a little taste of that here right now. If I can do it. Something like that. So, of course, another thing that Kevin and I talked about that was kind of interesting and part of, I guess, both of our philosophy. If you're aware of Peter and the Wolf, the Prokofiev piece, where in a way it teaches young children to be aware of different instruments by having a bassoon, horns, strings represent different creatures, animals like a duck, wolf. This definitely came to be the embodiment of Dan in this film in a way that's similar to that. Beyond the use of charango, of course, ended up adding many other instruments as the story got more intense. That would include pianos, as Jean-Christophe pointed out, a kind of a brass band impact in one scene, a full string section, other heavier percussion popping in, even a marimba, kalimba, balalaikas at the end, and a bunch of voices all filtering in and some other ear candy sound design elements, which in the end, to me, I kind of started to feel that we arrived at a somewhat international feeling score where it didn't necessarily feel like it was from one nation, but had just hints of a lot of things, which added maybe helped subliminally add a little bit of a universality to the whole feeling of the film. Anyway, I really also wanted to thank, in the same way Brad and Kevin have talked about the importance of collaboration amongst animators and visual effects artists. There's no way that my end would have ended up being nearly as productive if it wasn't for the input of people like Michael Weissman, the film editor, other people like Ashley Chafin and Earl Ghaffari, but especially Brad Simonsen and Kevin Hudson. It was an awesome collaboration. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do want to say about the collaboration, because that was really...
Yeah, I mean, on the point of collaboration, I mean, I think that as you're making your films, be open, be super open to receiving feedback. We're really open at Disney. Every single screening, anybody who sees the movie can write notes. We encourage them to write notes. So, you know, Dale came in, and it was one of the first conversations we had where I was like, hey, I hope you're cool with folks joining us. We're going to be bringing different people in, and we really believe in asking people's opinion. So we do have a great music department, and you know, one of the notes, and Dale was just so open to it. We'd go in and we'd watch, and I would catch people in the hall. One was Earl Ghaffari, and it was the end, and when Dan falls, we'd actually already put the track in. We were doing a music review, and I just caught Earl, and I said, hey, would you just have 5 minutes to look at a little movie? We're doing this short film. Could you give us if you have any notes at all, we'd love to hear them. And these guys do the temp score for all of the movies, and we do musicals, so clearly they know what they're doing. And he came in, he watched it once, and he said, hey, you know where he falls? Like, clear that out. Don't bring the music back in until after he's down. Like, we need to hear that impact. That's your emotional core. We're like, and then we went in, we reviewed it with Michael, and Michael gave us the note, and we all went, and then we watched it, and we all went like, whoa, that really works. So, kudos to Dale for being open to collaborating, because that's how you're going to elevate your movies, is by having people participate.
Exactly. That was really proud for me, because I don't have a whole lot of experience with music. I had kind of an idea what I wanted, but it was great having these people that have experience, that have all this knowledge to come in and help lift those areas where you don't know. So just sort of wrapping things up. Been sort of looking back over the film and trying to figure out, okay, what we got right, what did we learn along the way? And so what we got right is we spent a lot of time thinking about the story in script form. It's like I wrote it out and throw it to people and got opinions back and wrote it out, and then I did those little like pictures that I could flash to JCP, or I'd corner people in the hallway and say, here's the story of this little film, what do you think? And it was fun to, like, because you had this little show, like picture aid storyboards that you could sort of say, here's the shots of our film. And then, shot 1, it's the house. Shot 2, here's our guy. Shot 3, he's looking at the water. And usually I get to that shot and they'd all go, oh. And you go, okay, they get it. They understand the want. And so being able to set up the want of the main character that quickly was really helpful. And then being open to the collaborative experience and allowing the film to evolve as it's going to. And if I hadn't been open to that evolving of the film, that he would still have those 3 dots on his face rolling into the dirt, and we would have lost the greatest moment in the film. So keeping scope creep under control. We kept the film from going beyond 2 characters. Everybody kept asking, are there any cars on this street? And it was like, no, there's no cars. It's not about cars. So trying to really sort of nail down what is the film about and being careful about letting it get too big, while still being collaborative and being open to everybody offering ideas of how we can make it better. So
always hear the idea. You don't need to do the idea, but be open and hear it at least.
It was funny. Most people that asked me, there's no cars on this street, are there? It was like, I guess it really aren't. Is cars really about cars? So they'd already kind of, even though they would ask about it, they already kind of figured out that there weren't cars. The time length, originally it was going to be 2 minutes, it ended up being about 2 minutes and 40 seconds. The multidisciplinary approach, the fix on fail kind of scenario was really helpful, because same thing with like the rig, building it out to a certain extent, and then planning that we would end up with like a one-off situation for the crazy shot. Same too with like the environment. It was built to a certain level, it was textured to a certain level, and then I would go back in when I was lighting it and only touch up the areas that really ended up needing to get extra detail, extra like seam fixes in the paint. Some of that stuff really kept the time manageable. And then finding really great allies that can help you to see your film with fresh perspective. People that can tell you when you're full of crap and your shot looks bad, is great. Because what's great is when those people tell you that tells you they care. It tells you they care about your film. And that'll help you to get out of that bubble you're in and see it through someone else's eyes. And it'll be a better film. The lessons I learned about the project is you've got to really, 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 really love your film. Because this will be a relationship that will dominate your life if you're making it. Because if you're making your spare time outside of work, you got to put in a couple hours a day or a week. You're spending your time on your weekends. So it's going to take over your life. So you just really got to love it, because you'll think it'll take you 6 months, and 1.5 years will go by, and you'll be almost done. So it may be longer. The guys up at Pixar that did a co-op short, it took them 5 years. That's grit.
It's an awesome short.
Yeah, it's much bigger than ours. Trust the group consciousness. Everybody, especially at Disney, is they're all people that understand the language of film. They understand what makes a good movie. They understand what cinema is and what animation is. And trusting them to have great ideas to input and trusting that their ideas are going to elevate the project is just, that is phenomenal. And what was amazing about some of that is ultimately became incredibly, it just became really a wonderful experience when someone would take this idea, absorb it, and come out with a better idea. And something, you know, that it became the most gratifying experience. Collaborate, better is better. Let a good idea be a good idea. Let a better idea be a better idea, even if it's not yours. It's very easy to be that director that says, you know, I'm the director, and it's my idea, and then you shut down everybody else around you. Better to let everybody have ideas. And I said, find allies that are interested in film and have a stake. One of the first animators that came onto the project, they saw our little rough movie, and we talked about what the film was about, and they looked at me and said, that character's me. My parents brought me to America for a better life. And another animator came on, and he was from Guatemala, and his family brought him to America for a better life. And the number of people that had immigrant stories throughout the making of this film made it really, really, a really neat experience just to feel that. Shortcuts can ultimately cost time. So learned that lesson again. The other thing I learned is there was a moment in the film where it felt like the film wasn't going to get done. And it was like a producer had left, the guy who was helping on a lot of the animation left, and it went into this kind of little box. It was like, do I continue with this film? Do we keep going? This is really getting hard. It's going to get hard. And it's okay to take a little pity time. If you need to have a little pity time, go do pity time. Then stop. And then it's time to get going again. And find people like Brad that'll tell you, let's do this. Let's get this done. We can do it. And then what I learned from that is, even if you're going, rather than going into stop mode, maybe just do one thing each day. Do a little bit. Keep the momentum going. And then ask people for help. One of your jobs, and you're working on your film, and Brad's job as producer, is to go out and find people to help you on your film. Because if you don't do it, who's going to? So believe in your film, and don't be afraid to ask people. Yeah, people will tell you no. And people that you thought would tell you yes may tell you no. And those are the hard ones. But then what's wonderful are people that you don't think would tell you yes will come on and say yes. And then that'll make a huge difference. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. And laugh at them, because you gotta keep a sense of humor about all this thing, or it could get really kind of tragic. And everybody knows you don't want a miserable lead, you want a helpful lead. So we also learned, make sure you lock your Vimeo. When you post your Vimeo online, you can set it so it's password protected. There's also a box you gotta make sure you check, so that the people that are viewing your Vimeo with the password don't start downloading it.
Yeah, because it is locked because you gave out the password, but so literally we were entering festivals, and I watched a lot of the data, and I was looking at where we were screening, because you can bring up a map. I'm like, oh, cool, someone just watched it in France. Oh, cool, someone just watched it in Germany. Oh, someone just downloaded it. And then I call Kevin, I'm like, did you approve downloads? Hold on a second. And then there's a little teeny box that you check at the bottom. Most of you probably already know this, but we were naive. So I checked the box and saved, and we're all good now.
Learn from our mistake. Yeah. And then we learned also, like, our film ended, or we finished our film at the end of summer. Which isn't the best time to end. If you really want, we could have sat on it till spring and then started up, and then we go through the thing next year. But ideally,
or late fall. So it depends upon what you want to do with your movie. If you want to do the festival circuit and try to qualify for the award season, basically, people finish either really late fall or even winter, spring, because then they can apply, run the whole festival circuit all year round. And then if you win certain festivals, you become eligible for, like, the Oscars, for example. So really targeting that fall, we made a mad dash, and it's working. But I think if we were to live it all again, we'd probably take a beat. I was fearful because we're both on Wreck-It Ralph. Yeah. And Wreck-It Ralph we're kicking back into gear. We're back in production now. And I was very fearful that if we sat on it and tried to do the festival circuit, that we literally would just not have time to give the movie what it deserved.
One thing I haven't added to the list that I also learned is a lot of festivals, if you contact them, they're happy to look at your film even if it's not done. So if you have a film that's close to being done and you can promise them that it'll be done by the time of their festival, they'll be happy to take a quick look at it.
Yeah, we got into Spark up in Canada, and we got in with a version that wasn't complete, and then we finished, and it was fine.
So, and then the last thing, we want to leave you guys with hope. If you're starting on a film and you're in that spot of can you finish it, you can. You know.
Yeah, you can do it.
So,
and then one last note. This was one of the reasons this film means so much to me and meant so much when I saw it. Is my wife is a first-generation immigrant from Thailand, so I filed all the paperwork for her. So that driveway to me represents about 1,000 pages of paperwork that I had to fill out for the fiancé visa, the 2-year green card, the 10-year green card, and ultimately her citizenship. I grew up in Montana, Washington, and Idaho, third-generation American, and I had no idea how difficult this process is. I had a passport when I was 5. So really taking my wife through the process gave me so much empathy for anybody dealing with that administration. So if you are dealing with that, I'm sorry. And stay strong, because it's possible. But really, you know, the movie for me embodies that spirit of wanting something more. And that's actually her graduation class down at the
there she is.
At the center. Yeah, there she is. Yeah.
So we have our website, weedshort.com. We have our Facebook page. And we have tons of people to thank that all helped out. So especially a little anonymous mouse.
Yeah, and thank you, Walt Disney Animation Studios, for the team letting us do it.
We have a special announcement that the film is going to be released online on weedshort.com November 12th through the 26th. So over the holiday weekend, you guys can all watch the film and share it with your friends.
Yeah, we'd love you to.
Our goal is to make a little grassroots effort go viral. So.
Cool. Well, that's our presentation.
Does anyone have any questions out there?
Thank you so much, guys. Yeah, we have, well, we're running a little bit late, but we'll take a couple questions, then we'll wrap up, and then I believe we're going to end with another screening of the film again, just to keep you guys all going. So do we have any questions here on the stage?
Yep, he's coming.
I can't see it.
When did you guys start the film? So how long did it take? You said you finished it this summer. When did you guys actually start the film from the beginning of the story?
The story started formulating in about March of 2 years ago. Well, it was about a year and a half, March, wherever you are. Okay, yeah, it was in that March time period when.
And then we finished in August 30th of this year.
August 30th at 12 a.m. or 12 noon.
12 noon.
12 noon.
It felt
whatever
like
that is, 12 p.m. 12.
Just one more question. Did your neighbor know that you were using her as inspiration for the refugee camp?
No.
Thank you.
She's elderly, and God bless her. I mean, she...
To her credit, she's 80-something and very frail and just doesn't want her yard.
She's still got a yard. I mean, give her that.
Yes.
It's awesome.
Any other questions? Yeah? Okay, just a sec.
So I'm an animator and going through animation. You were talking about how 2D, drawing 2D helps you visualize. And I was wondering if you could lay out some more examples of how you can prepare your shot in your head, not only with 2D and looking for and filming yourself. What are some other ways that you can prepare and look for the best that you can do in the animation?
Well, I mentioned the hand-drawn, and also some people film themselves. Sometimes looking at the script. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll write down, if it's a dialogue shot, I have the dialogue, but then I also write down the subtext. Actually, if I don't do video reference. I act things out in front of like a mirror, or I act it out just in the room. I thumbnail. If it's a dialogue shot, sometimes I won't even say the text. I won't even say the dialogue. I'll repeat to myself the subtext of what I want to communicate in each phrase. So I'll break it down by doing it in phrases. It makes it clear to what you want to communicate to the audience at that moment, or what you're trying to get across. And it's always about, I'm trying to think about like, what do I want to communicate to the audience about that character? The movement shouldn't be for movement's sake. You're always trying to tell, because you only have so much time on screen. You're looking for exactly what you want to communicate. I hope that answered your question.
Maybe I can also answer a little bit the question. I'm not an animator. Yes, I was an animator inside a TV show. We have a good exercise in animation, so like just a guy putting a letter in a box. And what's important to animate this guy, it's what's inside the letter. It's a love letter. The guys can arrive with a walk, with light walk and happiness on the face and say, oh, my little darling, and boom, put the letter in. It's a tax return stuff, or it's like a ticket. Oh, sure, a ticket, $200. Like, only something you are not seeing on the screen because it's inside the envelope. This one is the motivation of your action. That's a nice test to do. Another thing, like a legacy in Disney, on the past, on the 2D, when Disney animating 2D on paper, it was like final recording. And the guy was listening the song and trying to get the emotion of the actor when the guy is saying the dialogue. On 3D work is not the same because it's a lot of time is fake dialogue or something. No, did you get the final dialogue when you start animating your shots?
Oh yeah.
In 3D? Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yes, like I think the emotion on the voice is telling it, and the emotion is something you are not seeing. It's you just like hearing in, but you have to translate that with your animation.
Yeah, sometimes you put your headspace in there. Like so, I would listen to.
Sorry, it's me. My fault.
Everybody okay?
You listen.
Sorry, please.
Oh, just listening to music. Just put you in the mood. Thinking about the backstory of a character. Just knowing your character. There's many acting techniques and things just to get in that headspace. But yeah. I'm sure there's a million things like that. Just not thinking of right now.
That was great. Thank you, guys. And then last chance for questions. Yes, okay.
Hi, I'm a motion graphics artist. Whenever I was an early teen, I got my start with a pirated version of Macromedia Flash. Where did you guys get your first real start in animation? I'm interested in hearing like what the birthing process of that was for each of you that are animators.
Oh, well, just drawing, really. There wasn't any software, just being a kid and telling stories. My daughter, she's 8 years old now, and my wife is an illustrator, actually. And my daughter, I think she mimics her because she makes these stories. She illustrates her own little books. She's watching her mom, and I remember doing the same thing, just drawing out, little stories. I mean, it was just a paper and pencil. Yeah.
When I did start animation, 2D animation. I was drawing, lot of 2D drawing. You can throw your drawing away, you can retouch your drawing, you can erase your drawing. But when you start to animate, that's totally different process. You are animating. Then the drawing go to the technique, was scan, and boom, suddenly it's not drawing anymore. It's motion, it's emotion. And when you see the little guy you just animate for weeks or hours or days, start moving in front of you, it's not you anymore. You give, like illusion of life is that. You give life to this guy, and the guy didn't need you. You are kind of split from this thing. It's not your stuff anymore, because when you animate, the guy is not really moving, and the technique make the guys into life. And that was my first animation. Ooh, it was a big slam on my face. Okay, that I know. I need to do animation. I need to work in animation and reach Disney. Thank you.
I just fell in love with movies. I was a projectionist at a multiplex in high school, and I watched movies over and over and over and over and over again. And I grew up in Spokane, Washington, so I didn't have anybody in my world that actually made money making movies. So I didn't understand how people made money. So I would watch the credits over and over again, and I could tell you all the credits and the titles, but I didn't really know what they did. So I chickened out and went to business school. And I got my business degree, and then I moved to Hollywood. I did independent filmmaking in Seattle. I went to UW Business School, and I did independent filmmaking in Seattle, and I worked for the University of Washington shooting like educational and corporate videos. So I kind of had an education in production through my work, and then I came down and applied it to film here.
I was just at UCLA last night, and we did a presentation in my hometown a couple weeks ago. I was the film dork in high school that was making sci-fi movies. If you saw that movie, Super 8, that was my life except without the alien. And there's me when I had hair with one of the creatures I made for this film, and there's me with this house that we blew up in my neighbor's garage and caught my neighbor's garage on fire.
That's a theme in Kevin's life.
Yeah, well, then I went to college. Wait, where's my college one? So, yeah. Let's see, I went to college, UCLA, the film school, and there it is. And because I did special effects, I helped out on a lot of people's special effects films. I played a monster in one of my friend's films in college, and made up another friend as a monster for another film in college. And then I decided to make a war film, and I caught the school on fire.
Literally last night, I have to tell this. Last night we're at UCLA, and he's speaking, and he's so proud, and he's like, yeah, and then he brings this up, and he says, yeah, I got the school on fire. And the instructor in the front row, who's probably in his late 50s, goes, that was you? I tell that story all the time.
What was the word he used?
Like, wow.
You're like infamous, or that's. And I suddenly went, yes, I've made my mark at UCLA. I will be remembered forever. So yeah, I'm the UCLA filmmaker who caught the school on fire and burned a quarter acre of the school. What I did learn out of this, it was kind of a funny punchline. This whole thing is the film ended up winning top awards that year, not because it caught the school on fire, because it was actually a really good movie. And I got on page 6 in the Daily Bruin with all the other filmmakers talking about their films. When I caught the school on fire, I got on the front page twice. So there's a lesson. Burn the school, get the front page. So,
please don't give students ideas. No. Don't do it, guys.
Not here.
Yeah. Not here.
Not here.
Yeah, don't catch Gnomon on fire.
Yeah. Do it in Houdini.
That's the great thing about computers. You're safe.
Yeah, you're safe.
We have an open door in Disney. So
yeah.
Can visit.
Hendrik?
So my first fascination was actually with stop motion, and it was way before digital revolution. There was like when I think had my first access to a digital camera even, and so I planned that stop motion film that never came to be because I was just like too lazy, and then I actually studied computer science, and it turned out I was too lazy for that too. So but then when I actually finally found about simulation and procedural animation, I was like, that's great. The computer is doing most of the stuff for you. So
The computer is working for me.
That's how I found my love for effects animation.
Awesome, guys. We had a question on live stream about what tools should a beginner look into using for animation. So Wayne, maybe for you.
Beginner?
Yeah.
What age?
Pardon?
Does it say an age?
No, I'm not sure. I'm not
well,
sure the age.
I use a tool called TV Paint for traditional animation. There are many tools out there. I mean, there's Flash. There's Toon Boom. If it's I don't know the age, but for fun, at one point I was doing 2D animation on my Nintendo DS. Like, I mean, not too long ago, really.
He's a gamer, though, so you might have to have skills. I don't know.
No, I mean, if it's someone in high school or whatever who wants to just try. The reason why I did it on my Nintendo DS was because I just wanted something portable that I could take with me. Then I ran out of memory, and then so I got a tablet PC and proper software and all that.
Yeah. Do you ever use Procreate, or is that more for just drawing?
That's more for drawing. But it's a great drawing app.
Yeah.
Oh, I have an anecdote also with animation. I remember we are working on Goofy movie, and the animator was trying to find something crazy, like a reaction of Goofy when he just arrived really close to a big, giant waterfall, and the car he was sitting on. Well, I could not tell all the movie, but like a weird reaction of like scary stuff. And the guys didn't go with any drawing, any acting. It was just a puppet of Goofy. Put the puppet of Goofy under the camera, and just the rhythm and the motion of the arm is just shoot these little pics, motion capture kind of things. And it was so funny. Everybody was like, say, "Oh wow, that's the animation!" And then the animation was coming from that. A different way to animate, or finding the right tool to be right, to find the right stuff on screen.
Awesome. And then Kevin, could you clarify how many artists contributed to this project overall? One of our live stream viewers is interested to know.
I can't think of the exact. I'm guessing it's somewhere around 30 people.
Okay.
Total, all chipped in.
It's on IMDb, and it will
Okay.
have the exact number.
Okay.
One of the
Including
basic
the special thanks.
One of the basic ideas was
Thank you,
many
Gail.
hands make light work. So it was like,
Yes.
if you're getting people in their spare time, rather than depending on a few people a lot of their spare time, if you say, well, could you? Because a lot of people go, well, hey, would you do all the effects? And they're like, oh, yeah, right, no. Unless they're Hendrik, and then, Or the other routine is you get them in to do one, and then you sucker them in for another couple. Or what you do is you say, hey, could you do a dust element for me? Or could you do the heat ripples? And a lot of people are happy to chip in if it's something measurable that they could say, that's all I really need to do is just help out in this one thing. Or can you do 2 shots? Could you animate 2 shots for me?
And it's a lot about timing, too. I mean, some people really actually do want to help, and they're sincere, but they're just busy. And if you keep coming back to them and just checking in, we ended up with an animator doing one of the shots in the movie that had said that they'd wanted to and just didn't have time, and then finally it happened. So don't be afraid to go back and check in with people.
Yeah.
I think another important part is bribing with sweets.
Oh yeah, we did that.
Yes.
Yeah, Kevin bakes.
Kevin even did that to get me come here tonight. So.
Yeah, if anything has a weakness for Oreos. So I came by his cube the other day and I went, hey, Oreos? And he went to reach over and I pulled away. Will you come and talk at the Yeoman thing?
There are Christmas Oreos out now, by the way. We found those. They're red.
I just seen that ad for it. That was what prompted the pullback.
You always had this exotic Oreo flavor sense.
I did. Yeah.
Stuff I've never seen.
Gotta hit Joe for some Oreos. Oreos.
I love sharing Oreos.
Oh, yeah, I love Oreos.
No, the most important thing I think really out of that is just being appreciative. 'Cause everybody that donated their time, that trusted that we would actually finish what we said we were going to do, that's a leap of faith. And to all the people up here at this table and all the people that helped out, whether their contribution was small or large, we never would have made the film without them. Someone asked, like, is there any, what was something important? Was it a more important shot or a more important contribution? Ultimately, when you're dealing with 30 shots and you're dealing with this small of a project, everything's important because you can't get rid of any of the shots that are in there. Otherwise, the film doesn't work.
That's awesome. I think we should have another round of applause after that. Thank you. Okay, so thank you so much, guys. It's been an honor to have you all here with us tonight and for sharing all your stories with us.